The gunshot echoed through the valley as Penelope Taylor ran, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild stallion. Blood seeped from the graze on her arm, but the pain was nothing compared to the terror that pushed her deeper into the Colorado wilderness in the autumn of 1875. Behind her, the voices of her pursuers grew fainter, but she didn't dare slow her pace. They had taken everything from her father, her home, and now they wanted her life too. Night was falling across the rugged landscape when Penelope finally collapsed against the base of a towering pine. Her once fine dress was torn and mudded, her auburn hair tangled with twigs and leaves. The temperature dropped rapidly as darkness descended, and she huddled against the trunk, trying to stop her violent shaking. The men would continue hunting her at first light. Judge Monroe Taylor's only daughter would not escape their vengeance so easily. Penelope hadn't planned on hiding in the woods. She'd intended to reach the next town and telegraph for help, but the ambush had forced her to flee into unfamiliar wilderness. Her father's enemies had been waiting for the opportunity to strike ever since he'd sentenced the Kendrick brothers to hang. Now Judge Taylor was dead, and his daughter was their next target. As dawn broke over the mountains, Penelope awakened with a start. Every muscle ached and hunger gnawed at her stomach. She'd had no food since yesterday morning. Worse, she heard distant voices her pursuers were on the move again. With painful determination, she pushed herself to her feet and stumbled deeper into the forest. For 3 days, Penelope evaded capture. She drank from streams and ate what berries she could identify as safe, but weakness was overtaking her. The wound on her arm had become inflamed and fever set in. On the 4th morning, she could barely stand. She crawled into a small hollow beneath a fallen tree and curled into herself, shaking with cold despite the fever burning through her. "I won't die like this," she whispered to herself, though her body seemed determined to prove otherwise. Miles away, Vaughn Mitchell adjusted his hat against the glaring sun as he guided his horse along a seldom-used trail. At 30, he'd spent half his life as a rancher and occasionally as a tracker when the sheriff needed assistance. His reputation for finding lost people and livestock had spread throughout the territory, though he preferred the solitude of his modest ranch to the company of others. His dog, Scout, trotted ahead, nose to the ground and tail wagging with excitement. They were returning from delivering a herd of cattle to a neighboring ranch when Scout suddenly stopped, ears perked forward. The dog let out a low whine before darting off the trail. "Scout, get back here," Vaughn called, but the dog had already disappeared into the underbrush. With a sigh, he guided his horse off the path to follow. Scout had never disobeyed without good reason. The dog led him to a dense thicket where he stopped and began pawing at the ground, whining urgently. Dismounting, Vaughn pushed aside branches and peered into the hollow beneath a fallen tree. His breath caught in his throat. A woman lay huddled there, her body trembling violently. Her dress was torn and stained, her skin pale except for the unhealthy flush of fever on her cheeks. "Miss," he called softly, not wanting to frighten her. Penelope's eyes flew open at the sound of his voice. With a strangled cry, she pushed herself further into the hollow. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracked from thirst, "don't hurt me." Vaughn raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're injured. Let me help." Penelope stared at him with feverish eyes. She saw a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and kind eyes beneath the brim of his worn cowboy hat. Not one of the men who had been hunting her. But could she trust him? "They are after me," she managed to say. "They killed my father." Vaughn nodded slowly, keeping his movements gentle. "I'm Vaughn Mitchell. I have a ranch about 3 hours' ride from here. If you'll let me, I can take you there where you'll be safe." "How do I know you're not working with them?" Penelope asked, though her resistance was weakening as the fever consumed her strength. "You don't," Vaughn admitted. "But you'll die out here without help." The simple truth of his words penetrated her fear. With no other choice, Penelope nodded weakly. Moving carefully, Vaughn reached into the hollow and lifted her out. She was lighter than he expected and burning with fever. He carried her to his horse and mounted with her secured in front of him. Scouts circled anxiously as Vaughn wrapped his coat around the shivering woman. "What's your name?" he asked, hoping to keep her conscious. "Penelope Taylor," she whispered before losing consciousness against his chest. Vaughn's jaw tightened. Judge Taylor's daughter. He'd heard about the judge's murder 3 days ago but hadn't known his daughter was missing. Spurring his horse to a faster pace, he headed for his ranch. Whoever was hunting her would have to go through him first. The Mitchell ranch was modest compared to some in the territory, but Vaughn had built it with his own hands over the past decade. A main house, barn and bunkhouse for the 2 ranch hands he employed stood in a clearing surrounded by aspen trees. As he approached, his foreman Henry came running from the barn. "Mr. Mitchell, you're back early." Henry stopped short when he saw the woman in Vaughn's arms. "Who's that?" "Penelope Taylor, Judge Taylor's daughter. She's been hiding in the woods for days. She's feverish and injured." Vaughn dismounted carefully, keeping Penelope secure in his arms. "Take care of my horse. I need to get her inside." Inside the house, Vaughn laid Penelope on his bed and sent Henry to fetch Martha Warren, a widow who lived a mile down the road and who had nursing experience. While waiting, he gently cleaned the wound on Penelope's arm, wincing at the angry red streaks extending from it. Blood poisoning was setting in. When Martha arrived, she took one look at Penelope and ordered Vaughn from the room. "I'll need hot water, clean cloth, and whatever medicinal whiskey you have. This girl's fighting for her life." For 2 days, Penelope drifted in and out of consciousness. Martha stayed at the ranch, applying poultices to the infected wound and spooning broth between Penelope's cracked lips when she was lucid enough to swallow. Vaughn paced outside the bedroom, waiting for news and trying to piece together what had happened. On the evening of the 2nd day, he rode into town to speak with Sheriff Donovan. "Vaughn," the sheriff greeted him as he entered the small jailhouse. "Wasn't expecting to see you." "I found Penelope Taylor," Vaughn said without preamble. "She's at my ranch recovering from an infected bullet wound." Sheriff Donovan's eyebrows shot up. "She's alive, thank God. We'd given her up for dead after finding no trace of her. Her father's housekeeper was murdered too, you know." Penelope said men were hunting her. "Any idea who?" The sheriff's face darkened. "The Kendrick gang, most likely. Judge Taylor sentenced their leader and his brother to hang. The hanging's scheduled for next week, but their cousins swore revenge. They murdered the judge in his own courtroom. They'll come after her to finish the job," Vaughn said. "She's the only witness who could identify them." "I'll send a deputy out to your ranch," Sheriff Donovan offered. Vaughn shook his head. "Better not. If they're watching the town, they'll follow him straight to her. Just let me know who I'm looking for." The sheriff provided descriptions of the 3 Kendrick cousins, and Vaughn headed back to his ranch, more determined than ever to protect the woman who had stumbled into his life. When he returned, Martha met him at the door with a tired smile. "Her fever broke about an hour ago." "She's weak, but I think she'll pull through." Relief flooded through Vaughn. "Can I see her?" Martha nodded. "She's been asking for you, seems mighty concerned about putting you in danger." Vaughn entered the bedroom quietly. Penelope was propped up against the pillows, her auburn hair washed and braided by Martha's careful hands. Though still pale, her eyes were clear of fever as they met his. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice stronger than before. "I need to thank you for saving my life." "Call me Vaughn," he said, settling into the chair beside the bed. "And there's no need for thanks. Anyone would have done the same." Penelope shook her head. "No, they wouldn't. Not with the Kendrick gang after me." She swallowed hard. "I need to leave as soon as possible. They'll keep hunting me, and I won't bring their violence to your door." "You're not going anywhere until you're healed," Vaughn said firmly. "And even then, you won't face them alone. I've spoken with Sheriff Donovan. He knows you're alive now, but we agreed it's safer if you stay hidden here until the remaining Kendricks are caught." Tears filled Penelope's eyes. "They killed my father right in front of me, shot him as he sat at his bench. I ran, and they came after me. I made it to the woods behind the courthouse, but they tracked me. One of them shot me as I fled." Her hand touched the bandage on her arm. "I've been running ever since." "You're safe now," Vaughn assured her, though he knew the danger wasn't past. "Rest. Recover your strength. We'll figure out what to do next when you're stronger." Over the next week, Penelope regained her strength. Martha had returned to her own home but visited daily to check on Penelope's recovery. During this time, Vaughn found himself drawn to the judge's daughter in a way he hadn't expected. Penelope wasn't just beautiful with her auburn hair and determined green eyes. She was intelligent and resilient. Despite her ordeal, she insisted on helping around the house as soon as she could stand without dizziness. She refused to be a burden, she said. "My father raised me to be independent," she explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "After my mother died when I was 12, he could have sent me back east to live with relatives, but he kept me with him. He taught me to ride, to shoot, to think for myself." "He sounds like a good man," Vaughn said. "I met him once when he first came to the territory. He was fair, even when his rulings weren't popular." Penelope smiled sadly. "He believed justice should be blind to a person's wealth or standing. That's why the Kendricks hated him. He treated them the same as he would any man who broke the law." "Is that why you were with him at the courthouse that day?" Vaughn asked. Penelope nodded. "I often assisted him with paperwork. I was in his chambers when they burst in." Her hands trembled at the memory. 3 men. They didn't even say a word, just started shooting. "Father pushed me toward the back door and told me to run. I didn't want to leave him, but he insisted." Vaughn reached out and took her trembling hands in his. They were soft against his calloused palms. "You honored his wishes, you survived, that's what he wanted." She looked up at him, tears shining in her eyes. "But what do I do now? I have no family left. Our house in town is probably being watched. Everything I owned was there." "You can stay here as long as you need," Vaughn offered. "At least until the Kendricks are caught." The next morning, Vaughn was checking fences with his ranch hands when Scout began barking furiously. Through his spyglass, Vaughn spotted 3 riders approaching from the direction of town. "Henry," he called to his foreman, "ride back to the house. Get Miss Taylor to the hiding place we prepared, then come back with my rifle." Henry nodded and galloped toward the house. Vaughn had shown Penelope the hidden cellar beneath the barn floor the day before, just in case of unwanted visitors. By the time the 3 riders reached the fence line, Vaughn was casually repairing a broken post. He looked up as if just noticing them. "Afternoon, gentlemen." "Something I can help you with?" The lead rider, a man with a jagged scar across his cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. "We're looking for a woman. Judge Taylor's daughter, heard she might be in these parts." Vaughn frowned, feigning confusion. "Judge Taylor's daughter. I heard the judge was killed last week. Terrible business." "His daughter went missing," the man said, his eyes cold as they studied Vaughn. "We're family friends, worried about her safety." "Haven't seen any woman out here except Martha Warren, the widow who lives down the way," Vaughn said easily. "But I'll keep an eye out. What's the girl look like?" The scarred man described Penelope with unsettling accuracy, watching Vaughn's face for any reaction. "If I see her, who should I tell her is looking for her?" Vaughn asked. "James Kendrick," the man said. "And my cousins Luke and Silas were mighty concerned about her." Vaughn kept his expression neutral, though his blood ran cold. These were the men who had murdered Penelope's father and had been hunting her through the woods. "Well, Mr. Kendrick, I'll certainly let her know if I see her, but this is a big territory. She could be anywhere by now." James Kendrick's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we look around your place?" "She might have passed through without you knowing." "Actually, I do mind," Vaughn said, his voice hardening. "This is private property. Unless you have the sheriff with you, I'll have to ask you to move along." The tension between them stretched like a taut wire. Henry had returned and stood nearby, Vaughn's rifle in hand. The Kendrick cousins exchanged glances, clearly assessing their odds. Finally, James Kendrick tipped his hat with a cold smile. "We'll be on our way then, but we'll be back with the sheriff if necessary." "You do that," Vaughn said calmly. Sheriff Donovan's a good man. I'm sure he'd be interested in talking to you boys." The three men turned their horses and rode away, but Vaughn had no doubt they would be watching the ranch from a distance. When he returned to the house, he found Penelope emerging from the hidden cellar in the barn, her face pale but determined. "That was them," she said. "I heard their voices." "They'll be back," Vaughn warned. "And next time they might not come so openly." That night, Vaughn doubled the watch around the ranch. He, Henry, and his other ranch hand, Tom, took turns keeping guard. Penelope insisted on taking a shift as well, proving her skill with a rifle when she demonstrated her shooting ability. "Father believed a woman should be able to defend herself," she explained as she hit target after target that Vaughn had set up. "Your father was a wise man," Vaughn said, impressed by her marksmanship. As they walked back to the house, their hands brushed accidentally. Vaughn felt an electric current run through him at the contact, and when he looked at Penelope, he saw a blush coloring her cheeks. The connection between them was growing stronger each day, despite the danger surrounding them. That night, as Vaughn took the first watch on the porch, Penelope joined him with 2 cups of coffee. "You should be resting," he said as she handed him a steaming cup. "I can't sleep," she admitted, settling beside him on the porch swing. "Every time I close my eyes, I see them shooting my father." Vaughn wanted to comfort her, to pull her into his arms and promise that nothing would harm her, but he maintained a respectful distance. "It will get easier with time. The memories won't disappear, but they won't always be so sharp." "You sound like you speak from experience," Penelope observed quietly. Vaughn nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the porch. "My parents were killed in an Apache raid when I was 15. I was out hunting when it happened. Came home to find the ranch burned and them dead." "I'm so sorry," Penelope whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. "It was a long time ago," Vaughn said, "but I still remember how it felt, that helplessness, the guilt of surviving when they didn't." "That's exactly it," Penelope said. "I keep thinking if I had done something differently, maybe my father would still be alive." "That kind of thinking will eat you alive," Vaughn warned. "The only ones to blame are the men who pulled the trigger." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the porch swing creaking gently as they rocked. In the distance, an owl hooted, and closer by, Scout snuffled in his sleep where he lay at Vaughn's feet. "What will you do?" Vaughn asked eventually. "After the Kendricks are caught," Penelope sighed. "I don't know. Before all this, I was planning to study law like my father. He was arranging for me to apprentice with a lawyer friend of his in Denver next spring." She looked down at her hands. "Now I'm not sure what's left for me." "You're still the same woman you were before," Vaughn said. "With the same dreams and abilities. Don't let them take that from you too." Penelope looked at him, really looked at him. In the soft glow of the lantern light, she saw kindness in his eyes and something else that made her heart flutter. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For saving my life, for protecting me, for believing in me when I'm not sure I believe in myself." Before Vaughn could respond, Scout suddenly stood up, his ears alert and a low growl building in his throat. Vaughn immediately tensed, reaching for his rifle. "Get inside," he whispered to Penelope. "Wake Henry and Tom, tell them to take positions at the back windows." Penelope hesitated only briefly before slipping into the house. Vaughn moved to the edge of the porch, extinguishing the lantern as he went. In the silvery moonlight, he could just make out movement near the barn. At least 2 figures crept toward the house. The Kendricks had returned, just as he'd expected. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated Vaughn Mitchell and the woman he was growing to care for deeply. The first shot came from the darkness, splintering wood near Vaughn's head. He ducked and returned fire, aiming at the muzzle flash. A cry of pain told him he'd hit his target. The night erupted into gunfire. Henry and Tom fired from the rear of the house, suggesting the attackers had surrounded them. Vaughn held his position on the porch, firing methodically at any movement he detected. Suddenly, he heard Penelope's voice from inside the house. "Vaughn, the barn's on fire. Turning, he saw flames beginning to consume the wooden structure. The horses inside whinnied in panic. It was a diversion, he realized. While they focused on the house, someone had set fire to the barn to draw them out. "Stay inside," he shouted to Penelope as he sprinted toward the barn. The horses would die if they weren't released, and the fire could spread to the house if not contained. As Vaughn ran across the yard, bullets kicked up dirt around his feet. He zigzagged, making himself a harder target, and fired back as he went. Reaching the barn, he threw open the doors and rushed inside, coughing as smoke filled his lungs. He had just freed the last horse when a figure loomed in the doorway, silhouetted against the flames. James Kendrick leveled his pistol at Vaughn's chest. "Should have minded your own business, cowboy," he snarled. Before he could pull the trigger, a shot rang out. Kendrick staggered, a look of surprise crossing his face before he crumpled to the ground. Behind him stood Penelope, a rifle in her hands and determination in her eyes. "I told you to stay inside," Vaughn said as he rushed to her side. "You're welcome," she replied, keeping her rifle ready as they moved away from the burning barn. Gunfire continued to echo around the property. One of the Kendrick cousins was down, shot by Tom from the back window. The third man was pinned behind the water trough, exchanging fire with Henry. "We need to end this," Vaughn said, his mind racing. "He'll eventually work his way to the horses and escape." "I have an idea," Penelope said. She explained quickly, and though Vaughn didn't like putting her at risk, he had to admit it was a solid plan. While Henry kept the remaining Kendrick distracted with sporadic gunfire, Penelope and Vaughn circled around behind the water trough. With perfect coordination, they closed in on the last attacker. Caught in their crossfire, Silas Kendrick had no choice but to surrender. By dawn, Sheriff Donovan had arrived with 2 deputies. James Kendrick was dead, shot by Penelope as he prepared to kill Vaughn. Silas was in custody, and they had found Luke's body near the edge of the property. The threat to Penelope was finally over. As the sheriff prepared to take Silas back to town, he turned to Penelope. "Miss Taylor, when you're recovered enough, we'll need your testimony about your father's murder. With your account and this attempted attack, the Kendricks won't see daylight again." "I'll be there," Penelope promised. "My father believed in justice. I won't let his killers escape it." After the sheriff left, Vaughn and Penelope surveyed the damage to the ranch. The barn was a total loss, though thankfully all the animals had been saved. The house had some bullet holes but was otherwise intact. "I'm sorry about your barn," Penelope said as they stood amid the smoldering ruins. "Barns can be rebuilt," Vaughn replied, looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What matters is that you're safe." The adrenaline of the night had faded, leaving them both exhausted but aware of how close they had come to losing each other. Without thinking, Vaughn reached out and pulled Penelope into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his as if made to be there. "I almost lost you," he whispered against her hair, "when I saw Kendrick pointing that gun at you." "But you didn't lose me," Penelope said, looking up at him. "And I didn't lose you, we saved each other." Vaughn couldn't resist any longer. He lowered his mouth to hers in a gentle kiss that quickly deepened as Penelope responded with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. "I know it's too soon," Vaughn began, still holding her close. "We've only known each other a short time, and you're still recovering from everything that's happened. But I want you to know that I care for you, Penelope, deeply." Penelope touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Sometimes the heart knows what it wants, regardless of time or circumstance. When you found me in those woods, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to keep living." In the weeks that followed, Penelope gave her testimony at the trial of the surviving Kendrick cousin. Silas was sentenced to hang alongside his other relatives, who had been awaiting execution for the crimes that had prompted the revenge against Judge Taylor in the first place. With the danger past, Penelope could have returned to town or gone to Denver to pursue her legal studies as originally planned. Instead, she chose to stay at the Mitchell Ranch, helping Vaughn rebuild the barn and learning the daily workings of ranch life. Their courtship progressed naturally, their bond strengthening with each passing day. Vaughn admired Penelope's determination to honor her father's memory by continuing her legal studies, reading law books in the evenings. She planned to take the bar examination the following year, with the goal of becoming one of the territory's few female lawyers. Penelope, in turn, found in Vaughn the kind of partner her father had always hoped she would find, a man who respected her independence while offering support when needed. His quiet strength and unwavering integrity reminded her of the values her father had instilled in her. On a crisp autumn day, exactly 1 year after Vaughn had found Penelope huddled and shaking beneath that fallen tree, he took her riding to a scenic overlook on his property. Below them stretched miles of rugged beauty mountains, forests, and the winding silver ribbon of a river. "I come here when I need to think," Vaughn said as they dismounted. "When my parents died, I spent days up here trying to make sense of it all." "It's beautiful," Penelope said, breathing in the clean mountain air. "Peaceful." "I thought so too," Vaughn agreed, "but lately I've realized something. This view, this land, it's missing something important." "What's that?" Penelope asked, turning to look at him. Vaughn took her hands in his. "Someone to share it with, for good." Realization dawned in Penelope's eyes as Vaughn dropped to one knee before her. "Penelope Taylor, this past year has been the most meaningful of my life. You came into it unexpectedly, but now I can't imagine a single day without you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Penelope's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Vaughn, yes, with all my heart." He slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his mother's ring, which he had saved all these years. As he rose to his feet, Penelope threw her arms around him, and their lips met in a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and partnership. Their wedding took place the following spring, a joyful celebration that brought together the entire community. Martha Warren wept openly as Penelope walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory lace. Sheriff Donovan stood as Vaughn's best man, and even Henry and Tom cleaned up impressively for the occasion. Instead of a traditional honeymoon, the newlyweds traveled to Denver, where Penelope met with her father's lawyer friend to finalize arrangements for her legal apprenticeship. They agreed that she would study primarily from the ranch, traveling to Denver periodically for formal instruction. "Are you sure this is what you want?" Vaughn asked as they rode back to the ranch after their Denver trip. "Balancing ranch life with legal studies won't be easy." Penelope smiled at her husband, love shining in her eyes. "I'm sure of us, the rest we'll figure out together." 5 years later, Penelope Mitchell stood before the territorial court, being sworn in as the first female lawyer in the county. Vaughn watched from the audience, pride evident on his face. Beside him sat their 3-year-old daughter, Eleanor Martha Mitchell, named for Penelope's mother and the woman who had helped save Penelope's life. Little Eleanor clapped enthusiastically as her mother completed the oath, not fully understanding the significance of the moment, but feeding off the joy in the room. Vaughn bounced their 6-month-old son, James Taylor Mitchell, named for both grandfathers, on his knee. That evening, as the children slept, Penelope and Vaughn sat on their porch swing, just as they had done so many nights before. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. The rebuilt barn was now larger than before, and they had added a small office for Penelope's legal work. She had already developed a reputation for handling cases involving women and children who might otherwise have been denied justice. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up?" Penelope asked, leaning her head on Vaughn's shoulder. "That night when you found me in the woods." Vaughn's arm tightened around her. "Honestly, no, I was just hoping to keep you alive through the night. And now look at us," she said with a soft laugh. "A ranch, 2 beautiful children, and a law practice. We've built quite a life together." "We're not done building yet," Vaughn said, kissing the top of her head. "We have many years ahead of us." As twilight deepened into night, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms. Scout, now older but still vigilant, lay at their feet. From inside came the occasional small sound from their sleeping children. The dangers of the past had transformed into the blessings of the present. Penelope thought back to that desperate young woman who had hidden in the woods, certain her life was over. How wrong she had been. Her life hadn't ended in those woods, it had been reborn the moment Vaughn Mitchell found her huddled and shaking beneath that fallen tree. "I love you," she whispered to her husband. "Thank you for finding me." Vaughn tilted her chin up and kissed her tenderly. "I'll always find you, Penelope." No matter what. In the years that followed, the Mitchell family continued to thrive. Penelope's legal practice expanded, and she eventually partnered with a younger lawyer who had moved to the territory from Boston. Together, they worked to improve legal protections for women and children throughout the region, carrying on Judge Taylor's legacy of equal justice. Vaughn's ranch grew as well, becoming known for both its fine horses and innovative farming techniques. He had a talent for making things grow, whether crops or relationships. The ranch became a gathering place for the community, hosting seasonal celebrations and offering help to neighbors in need. Eleanor and James were joined by a third child when Penelope was 36, another daughter named Rose, who inherited her mother's auburn hair and her father's quiet determination. The Mitchell children grew up knowing both the value of hard work and the importance of compassion. Eleanor followed in her mother's footsteps and studied law, while James took to ranching with natural ability. Rose, the youngest, developed an interest in medicine after helping Martha Warren tend to an injured ranch hand. As Penelope and Vaughn entered their golden years, they could look back on a life well lived. The frightening days when Penelope had hidden in the woods, fleeing for her life, seemed like a lifetime ago, and in many ways they were. That terrified young woman had been transformed by love, courage, and the steadfast support of the cowboy who had found her when she needed him most. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw a celebration at the ranch. Friends from across the territory gathered to honor the couple whose love story had become something of a local legend. Even in their 60s, Vaughn and Penelope's devotion to each other remained evident in every glance, every touch. After the festivities, they took a quiet ride together to the overlook where Vaughn had proposed. Age had softened their features, but had done nothing to diminish the love between them. As they looked out over the land that had been their home for 4 decades, Penelope reached for Vaughn's hand. "If I had to go through it all again, the loss, the fear, even hiding in those woods, I would," she said softly, "because it led me to you." Vaughn brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "From the moment I found you, I knew my life would never be the same. You were worth every risk, every fight, every moment of worry." As the sun set over their beloved mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, Penelope and Vaughn Mitchell held each other close, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together. Their story, which had begun with violence and terror in the wilderness, had transformed into one of the territory's greatest love stories, proof that even in the darkest moments, love could take root and flourish. The frightened woman hiding in the woods and the cowboy who found her had built something remarkable together, a family, a legacy, and a love that would be remembered long after they were gone. And as twilight deepened into night, the stars appeared one by one above them, witnesses to a love that had survived every challenge and emerged stronger for having weathered the storms. "Thank you for finding me," Penelope whispered, echoing words she had spoken so many times over their years together. "Always," Vaughn replied, drawing her close as they turned their horses toward home. "Always."